Microsoft just made a move that's reshaping the entire AI industry, and most people haven't noticed. The company that poured over $10 billion into OpenAI is now quietly building its own AI models instead. Here's the twist. Microsoft's new Phi models are doing things that used to require expensive GPT-4 tokens. Think of it like a restaurant buying premium ingredients for years, then suddenly realizing they can make cheaper versions in-house that customers actually prefer. This change isn't an accident. It's part of a massive wave sweeping through the tech industry right now. Every big AI player is asking the same question: why pay for expensive third-party models when we can build our own? The stakes are huge. We are talking about billions of dollars in AI spending. And companies are realizing that going in-house can cut costs by 50% to 90%. But there's a catch. Building your own models takes serious engineering talent, custom datasets, and infrastructure. Not every company can do it. Microsoft can. And that means the competitive landscape of AI is about to change in ways most people don't understand yet. This isn't about replacing OpenAI. It's about Microsoft having options now. And when you have options in AI, you have power. The question isn't whether other companies will follow. They already are. Here's what's really happening behind the scenes and why you should care. To understand why Microsoft is making this move, you need to know how expensive running AI at scale actually is. A single query to GPT-4 costs fractions of a cent, but multiply that by millions of users, millions of times a day, and you're looking at enormous bills. Companies like Microsoft, Meta, and Amazon are spending hundreds of millions of dollars per year on AI inference. That's the cost of running AI models, not training them. Here's the problem. When you run other people's models, you're paying their pricing. OpenAI decides the cost per token, and you have no leverage. But if you build your own models, you own the math. Google did this years ago with Bard and Gemini. Meta built Llama and released it open source partly to escape paying OpenAI fees. Amazon is doing it with their own in-house models. Now Microsoft is joining the club. The math is straightforward. If you can build a model that does 80% of what GPT-4 does at 20% of the cost, that's a multi-billion-dollar advantage, especially when you're running that model millions of times per day across Azure data centers. Microsoft isn't doing this to hurt OpenAI. It's a business reality. As AI adoption explodes, companies that can't control their inference costs get priced out of the market. And Microsoft, with all its resources, can afford to invest in the infrastructure, research, and engineering needed to build competitive models in-house. This is economics, not personal. Meet Phi, Microsoft's lightweight alternative to GPT-4. The Phi family of models, versions 2.5 and 3, are what's called smaller but smarter. Here's the key insight. Bigger doesn't always mean better. For years, everyone assumed you needed hundreds of billions of parameters to get good AI. More parameters equals more capability, right? Not necessarily. Microsoft's engineers realized that with smart training techniques and careful data selection, you can build a model with 10% of the parameters of a large model and get 80% of the capability. Think of it like a chef using fewer, higher quality ingredients instead of just dumping in more of everything. Phi models are trained on curated datasets, not random internet text, but carefully filtered, high-quality examples. This matters because if your training data is cleaner, your model learns better patterns. Phi is also designed to be efficient. It runs faster, uses less power, and costs way less to operate than GPT-4. For things like customer service chatbots, coding assistance, summarization, or content moderation, Phi does the job at a fraction of the cost and with faster response times. Microsoft is embedding Phi into Azure services, Office applications, and business tools. When you use Copilot in Microsoft Teams, you might be using Phi on the back end instead of GPT-4. You won't notice the difference. But Microsoft's accounting department will. That's the real story here. So where exactly is Microsoft using Phi instead of expensive GPT-4 models? Let's look at real examples. First, customer support. When you message a company's chatbot, you don't need GPT-4 level reasoning. You need a model that can understand your question, search a knowledge base, and give you an answer. Phi can do that cheaper and faster. Microsoft is deploying Phi for exactly this. Second, code generation and autocomplete. GitHub Copilot, Microsoft's coding assistant, traditionally relied heavily on OpenAI models. But Phi is actually pretty good at coding tasks. Microsoft is testing Phi in Copilot for faster, cheaper code suggestions. Third, content moderation and filtering. Platforms need to scan millions of messages, images, and posts to catch spam and harmful content. You don't need cutting-edge reasoning for that. A smaller model like Phi works great and costs a fraction of the price. Fourth, summarization and text simplification. When you ask Copilot in Edge to summarize a web page or simplify an article that doesn't require GPT-4, Phi handles it. Fifth, internal business tools. Microsoft is using Phi to power AI features in Excel, Word, and Teams for things like meeting summaries, email drafting, and document organization. Here's what's wild. Most people won't even know they're using Phi. They'll just notice that Copilot is faster and their AI features work more reliably. That's the genius of this strategy. Now the real question, does Phi actually work as well as GPT-4? The answer is complicated, which is exactly why this strategy is brilliant. Here's the honest breakdown. On benchmarks that test reasoning, knowledge, and complex problem-solving, GPT-4 still wins. GPT-4 is the Lamborghini of language models. But on specific tasks, customer service, coding suggestions, summarization, categorization, Phi is 90% as good and costs 80% less. It's the Honda Civic of AI. Both get you where you need to go. Phi 3, Microsoft's smallest recent version, has 7 billion parameters. GPT-4 has over 100 times more. Yet on many practical tasks, the difference in output quality is minimal. Here's a concrete example. Ask GPT-4 to explain quantum computing in 5 ways. It'll give you an amazing, nuanced answer. Ask Phi the same thing. You'll get a solid explanation. It won't be as brilliant, but it'll be good enough. For business paying millions per year on AI inference, that difference of 10% in quality but 80% savings in cost is a no-brainer. This is why the strategy works. Microsoft isn't replacing GPT-4 everywhere. They're being surgical about it. They use GPT-4 where reasoning and depth matter. They use Phi where speed and cost matter. It's pragmatic, not ideological. Here's what most people miss about this trend. Microsoft's move signals the end of one era and the start of another. For years, OpenAI had leverage because building a competitive large language model seemed impossible without massive resources. ChatGPT felt like magic. Surely only OpenAI could pull off something this good. Well, turns out they can't be the only player. Google built Gemini. Meta built Llama. Now Microsoft is running its own playbook with Phi. The message is clear. If you have billions to spend and world-class engineers, you can build competitive models in-house. This changes everything about AI economics. OpenAI's leverage weakens when customers can choose to use Microsoft's models instead. OpenAI won't disappear. GPT-4 is still the best for certain tasks, but their monopoly is over. Second implication, costs for AI services will drop industry-wide. When companies compete on price and capability, customers win. Startups and smaller businesses will have cheaper access to AI. Cloud platforms will offer more AI options. Everyone benefits. Third implication, the company you work for might build its own AI models even if they are not a traditional AI company. Your bank might have in-house models. Your insurance company, your manufacturer. This is going to be one of the biggest infrastructure changes in tech since cloud computing. Fourth, open source models like Llama will become more important. Companies will want options, and open source gives them freedom. So how do you spot this trend in other companies? What should you watch for? Here are the signals. First, listen to what executives say in earnings calls. If a major tech company starts talking about developing proprietary AI capabilities or improving our internal AI infrastructure, that's code for we're building models in-house to cut costs. Second, watch for job postings. When a company starts hiring machine learning engineers, data scientists, and AI infrastructure specialists, they might be building their own models. Third, look at partnerships. If a company suddenly stops licensing from one AI provider and instead builds features themselves, that's a signal. Fourth, watch for announcements of custom models or fine-tuned versions of existing models. That's a middle step toward full in-house development. Fifth, watch the competition. If company A builds in-house models and sees cost savings, company B will watch closely. Competition spreads this pattern fast. Sixth, follow the money. Investment in GPU infrastructure, hiring of AI researchers, and announcements of new data centers signal preparation for in-house AI development. What does this mean for you? If you work in tech, in-house AI capabilities are becoming table stakes. If you use AI services as a customer, expect more options and lower costs as companies compete. If you're building a startup, this means the competitive landscape is shifting. AI is becoming something you might have to build yourself rather than license. This trend is just getting started. Here's what this all means. The AI revolution just entered a new phase. The era of one company controls the best AI is over. Welcome to the era of every company that can afford it builds its own. Microsoft's change to Phi is the biggest visible signal of this transition, but it's not unique. This is happening across the industry right now, and it's reshaping everything. What does it mean for you? 3 things. First, if you work in AI or tech, the skill to build and optimize AI models is becoming incredibly valuable. Companies need people who can do this. Second, if you use AI tools, expect better performance and lower prices as companies compete and cut costs. Third, if you're just watching from the sidelines, understand that the AI industry's economic foundation is shifting underneath us. The companies that own their AI will have power. The companies that depend on licensing will need to adapt. Microsoft gets it. Google gets it. Meta gets it. The only question now is whether smaller companies and startups can catch up. Some will, some won't. The gap between the haves and have-nots in AI just got wider. Over the next few years, we'll see which companies can successfully build competitive in-house AI and which ones get left behind. That's the story nobody's paying attention to yet, and it's the story that matters most. Follow for daily AI news, because this is just the beginning of the tech seismic change.